right, it is 10:02 and we will get this started. Good morning. And while it is blustery and cold outside, we are glad to have you here, hopefully with a warm beverage and ready to learn about the future of television. Though I'm here to tell you, the future is now. January 6th, Nielsen added broadband-only homes into its universe. So what does that mean for universe estimates and ratings and advertisers? Well, Cox Media teamed up with our friends at Nielsen to provide this forum to answer those questions. I am Mickey Smith, Director of Marketing for Cox Media Oklahoma. Cox Media is the advertising research to reach any wired home in Oklahoma. Through our partnerships with Dish, Direct, and AT&T, as well as through our parent company, the largest internet provider in the state of Oklahoma, Cox Communications, we are able to target audiences through video regardless of the platform or the delivery device that is used. So let's get to our agenda and see what we have in store for you this morning. We will have a preview of some upcoming programming that we would like to share with you. We'll introduce you to Claudine and Kimberly, who will walk through the changes happening with the Nielsen universe, and we'll have time set aside to answer your questions. If you have questions as we go through the presentation, feel free to type them in the question box on the right side of your screen. As I mentioned, we have time set aside at the end. We will definitely get to your questions. And what's that? Why, yes, at the end of today's webinar, we will draw 2 door prizes. We have a 50-inch smart TV and a pair of Apple AirPods to give away. Your names were entered into a drawing upon entry of this webinar. And at the end of our time together today, we will draw 2 winners. Must be present to win. So with that, let's get started. We are here to learn about the changes in how audiences will be measured. The one thing we all know right now is to attract an audience, you must have content people want to see. At Cox Media, we do. From 93% of all live sports to hit programs like Yellowstone or guilty pleasures like 90 Day Fiancé. Whether people are watching on cable or streaming the content, we can reach them through our own footprint and that of our partners on any screen, anytime, anywhere. We have some great things coming up through Q1. Take a look. So as you can see, with more than 60 networks, including our newest, Magnolia, we have the audiences you seek and the programming you hope to be in. If you would like to reach your audiences in our programming, let your Cox Media consultant know. All right. Now, let's move on to our guests. We are thrilled to welcome them today. Claudine Sokol is the Vice President of Client Solutions and Agency Client Services, who has been with Nielsen for more than 20 years. She has worked at every level of the business and fully understands the methodology utilized in universe and ratings estimates and delivery. We also have Kimberly Robson, Account Director and Local Media Client Services. She began her career in local market station research, becoming a research director before joining Nielsen more than 5 years ago. Kimberly manages Oklahoma City and Tulsa. As they go through the presentation, you may put your questions in the question box, so please feel free to do so. Welcome to both of you. We are thrilled to have you help our clients better understand the shifting landscape of the television universe and how ratings will be affected.
Thank you so much, Mickey. We're very excited to be here. I'm also joined on the Nielsen side by Stephanie Coggins, who's the rep for the market for both Oklahoma City and Tulsa for our agency and advertiser clients. So with that, and Kimberly will be sharing with you some other information during the course of our meeting. Let's go ahead and get started. Go to the next slide. There we go. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, as we mentioned and Mickey talked about, is what's going on with broadband only and its integration, which happened on January 6th. So let's talk about today what we've seen. So what we've seen, we can go to the next slide. Great. So let me first clarify what broadband only is. So broadband only means, as it's stated, it's basically traditionally cord cutters, right? That means a broadband only household, unlike our traditional household, which, just to remind you, are since time immemorial over-the-air homes, cable homes, or satellite homes. Those were our traditional and were part of the measurement up until this January. And that was the makeup of the whole universe. By adding in broadband only or cord cutters, we're changing the definition and the universe of what a traditional household is. And this is a true methodological change, right? So what are we talking about, a broadband only home? This is a home that only gets content through an internet or Wi-Fi connection. The internet goes out or the Wi-Fi goes out in the home, they don't have any other way of getting content, versus like a home that might have a cable or satellite or an over-the-air antenna, where if the internet goes out, you still can access content either through over-the-air or through your cable instead of satellite box. So for example, for us now, for broadband only homes, we are now including, as of January 6th, homes that previously maybe had like Cox internet service still on the other one, Cox internet service, and then they're now, were previously not included, now they are included. Okay, so that first type of home, so you have YouTube TV, you might get your local stations, your local cable, as well as being able to access through your different subscription video on demand like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, etc. Versus the traditional homes that are still being measured, which might, for example, have the Cox video service, get all of your local stations, your local cable, and also subscription video on demand. These homes are still in our sample and will continue to contribute. You can go next slide, please. Why is broadband only so important to our universes? Because right now, broadband only accounts nationally for over 28%. So they're already part of our universe. Nielsen has been including broadband only homes since 2013. And since that time, 2013 was 1.2%. Today it's over 28%. So it's grown exponentially in the last 9 years. Now, if you think back to 2013, there wasn't a lot of local content available digitally. So it didn't really make sense. However, you're going to hear me say this. Anything you can watch linear, you can watch digitally today. And they're also part of our universe, right? How many of you at home today can think back, maybe you cord cut it or know somebody who cord cut it or cord shaved, right? Just to give you an idea, here in Oklahoma City, for example, without broadband only, the universe was a little bit under 600,000. With inclusion of broadband only, that universe has grown by over 150,000 households. and they're watching the same thing. So we have to update our universe estimates of what our TV universe is, the homes that make up your media buys. Same thing in Tulsa. The universe of television households without broadband only was about 440,000. When we add in broadband only, we increase that by over 100,000 households. And it's part of our universe, right? It's a big methodological change. It's a true methodological change. So it's not just adding more sample. This is a real change, and you have to readjust all of your benchmarks or where even your trends. And we'll talk about that. Go to the next slide. So one of the things that we see here is that in Oklahoma City, and we'll talk about Tulsa next, is that broadband only is very similar to the national, right? About 28%. Amongst those homes that are broadband only homes, again, only getting content through an internet or video service provider, okay, that approximately 11% of them have what is called a virtual MVPD. So what is an MVPD? A multi-channel video programming distributor. Fancy way of saying you get a lot of content through a set-top box, right? So Cox is a MVPD. DirecTV, Dish is a MVPD. When we put the word virtual in front of it, we're saying we're getting the same content without that equipment necessarily. So for example, a virtual MVPD would be like a Cox Contour or TV Everywhere or DirecTV streaming or things like that. So what we're saying is that of the 28% of households here in Oklahoma City that have our broadband only, 11% of them have a virtual MVPD and are getting content through that, but 18% are not. The next slide will show you Tulsa, also not as a little bit under indexing for national at 25%, okay, but a little smaller degree of them have a virtual MVPD, about 8.2% have a virtual MVPD and 17% do not. Let me be really clear. A lot of these homes, and we know this again because of the national sample, a lot of these homes that have virtual MVPDs, they don't even know how they're getting their content, equipment or not. They just know that they're seeing their content. For example, I have 4 teenagers. They turn on a television. They don't know if they're getting it through a cable box, if they're getting it through an Apple TV, a Chromecast, a Fire Stick, or a Roku streaming stick, or the smart TV itself. The fact of the matter is that we're becoming a universe, right, where it's like over the air, cable satellite, and virtual MVPDs or smart TVs. All we care about is content. And the fact of the matter is now we've got the ability to include these households, every type of them, because they've already been watching, and they've been watching local cable, local broadcasts, but they weren't counted because they weren't part of our universe yet. And so that's the biggest thing that is changing now with the implementation and inclusion of broadband only home, as Mickey mentioned, on January 6th. We can go to the next slide. So we asked the question, how do broadband only homes contribute to television viewership or local viewing estimates, right? So depending on how they're streaming and what they're watching, right? So, you know, most homes, like we talked about the virtual MVPD. So here Nielsen has outlined 4 virtual MVPDs that provide and carry the same local broadcast feed and local cable channels with the same content and commercial load. And that's a big part of it. It has to have the same programming content and commercial load. And those are DirecTV Stream, Fubo TV, Hulu Live, and YouTube TV. So all of these virtual MVPDs not only carry the same program content, but the same ad load, okay, and can be credited accordingly and can be watched via their virtual MVPDs apps or on different smart TVs, etc. And that they provide and have shown us that they carry everything. They also, interesting, have DVR capability. So you're able to do not only live plus same day, live 1, live 3, live 7. So as long as it's the same programming and same commercial content within 7 days, they will credit back, just like an over-the-air home, just like a cable home and a satellite home. Now, the other thing is a lot of these homes with virtual MVPDs or cord cutters, they might view differently than traditional. So we have to be mindful of that. Okay, there's a reason they cord cut, right? Maybe they didn't want to watch certain programs, or maybe they wanted some things without commercials. The reality is that just like when we moved from over the air and people started getting cable and satellite subscriptions, they view differently. Broadband only homes view differently, and they might view things, you know, they got it, but for example, a young family that got Disney Plus and Netflix and stuff because they were showing a lot of programming without commercials. However, what we've seen, and again, Nielsen has the experience of 9 years with national, what we've seen is that broadband only homes will view local content, local cable, as Mickey mentioned, sports, things like this. They're content driven. So what we've seen is that even broadband only homes, they might not view the same way as traditional homes, like those that leave on the TV and watch all day long, you know, news and syndicated program, which by the way, that's me. They might view differently. They might turn to ad supported local broadcast, local cable based on a sporting event or, you know, something on HDTV or Bravo or local or cable news. The reality is, though, is that we have to be mindful, as you see in this illustration, is that depending on the type of household and how they get their feed is going to matter how they get credited. So here's an example, you know, where Nielsen here in Oklahoma, Tulsa or Oklahoma City, where Cox is showing, you know, multiple local cable channels with the same commercial load, same programming content, it's going to credit. However, some of the virtual MVPDs like YouTube TV, right, will carry those program content, but not the same commercial content. So those wouldn't contribute to that, to the ratings in the same way, right? You could get a digital rating, but it's not going to contribute to the currency that you're transacting business on for the local environment in that zone. And that's really where it comes down to. It's about commercial load and programming. So again, we said it's within 7 days, right? So if there's dynamic insertions or anything else like that, that's not going to be contributing to that number that you see on your media buying systems. The only number, the only audience from broadband only that contributes to that are those homes that are watching the same programming with the same program and commercial load. Same too if you're watching it through an app on a mobile device or anything else, that contributes only if it's the same content, programming, and ad load. We can go to the next slide. So what are the benefits of having broadband only intelligent homes? Well, I think it's pretty clear, right? The reality is that broadband only homes do in fact view the same programming content as traditional households. The only difference is that they were part of our universe. So Nielsen made the decision actually a long time ago, but COVID and other delays, you know, to include broadband only homes. And that's why when we made the switch January 6th, after numerous delays, we felt very confident in including them because we have had them. We just haven't had them contributing to the local ratings calculations or local measurement calculations, I should say, right? And as I said previously, anything you can watch linear, you can watch digitally now. So it's not an issue of, you know, if I can only watch something if it's live over the air. We know that there, like I mentioned, those virtual MVPDs that carry those local channels with the same programming and commercial content. The other thing is for agencies, for advertisers, even broadcasters, the ability to reach the media audience in total within your DMA is now available. Because now, prior to this, you were looking, okay, how do I supplement my buy? How am I going to get that OTT to get those people that aren't watching or aren't being measured in our service? Now you're able to do it, right? So you can reach all types of households, over-the-air households or cable satellite households, and now these internet or cord cutting households, because they are actually watching content, right? And as I mentioned, we've already been doing this in the national sample since 2013. So we know they should be included. The other thing that we're going to talk about in the next 2 slides is what is the makeup of broadband only homes? Because a lot of people have said, oh, you know what? Traditional televisions are skewing older. There's some truth to that, because what have we found? Broadband only households, by and large, are younger, larger, have kids, are ethnically diverse, and what we've seen here in Oklahoma is their higher income. So the fact of the matter is, we know that content, local ad-supported content, broadcast and cable, are being consumed by these households. And we also know that in order to provide a complete picture of these 2 markets and its media audiences, we have to include them. Next slide, please. So as you can see here in Oklahoma City, you know, when we look at AOH, stands for age of head under 35. Those are traditionally our younger households, okay? And we're going to add over 83,000 younger households by bringing in, which we did January 6th. That means younger households different types of viewing levels, but we're very excited about that. Next thing is households with kids. Anybody who has kids know that they control what's on the screen a lot of the time. We're going to add in almost 70,000 households with kids. And then household size 3+, larger homes. I don't know about the rest of you, but we were in lockdown in Los Angeles. And believe me, every single room became its own media room, whether it was a computer, an iPad, a mobile device, or a smart TV. And so we're going to add over 76,000 of these larger households, which means more content being consumed. And then 8 household income over 100,000. We're going to add in over almost 23,000 households with higher income. And that really will speak and help provide not only the quantitative differences, but also the qualitative differences in our audiences. Next slide, let's look at Tulsa. Tulsa, again, a little bit different, right? But again, age of head going to increase by over 50,000. Remember, we only increased here about 110,000 households with broadband only. Okay, so about 53,000 younger households. Very close to that is households with kids, almost 47,000 households being added with kids. Larger household size, about 52,000. And then households with incomes over 100K, we added in a little bit under 19,000. So a really exciting opportunity to see that these households, as I mentioned, are not only different in terms of how they get their content, but also qualitatively different. So that's going to also impact their viewing, right? So the programs and things that they've been viewing that previously you might have had to place external buys on, separate OTT or digital buys to try to reach them. Well, guess what? Now they're part of our media universe. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly Robeson to talk about the value of the rating point.
Thank you, Claudine. So what I want to cover on this, you've heard Claudine talk about how much the households have grown when we bring in the broadband only. So in here, I'm going to focus on the persons, excuse me, 2554, and talk about the value of that rating point. So on the left side, I'm going to focus on Oklahoma City first. So if we start at the top, the value of a 1 rating in OKC increases 48% among adults 25-54. So for every point, it goes from 4,863 persons per point to 7,182. So what that means is we've been in this VBO world now for 2 weeks. So 3 weeks ago, when you saw that 1 rating point, it was worth 4,863, and that's in the bold in that little table below. But if you follow that kind of aqua colored arrow down to the bottom, you'll see that I'm telling you, if you still want to look at ratings, and that some people are, and that's okay, but realize if a rating falls like points, let's call it a 0.7. I've got a 0.68 because I'm being pretty precise with these examples. That 0.68 today is worth 4,884 impressions in Oklahoma City. So honestly, that 0.68 today is delivering the same number of impressions as that 1 rating was 3 weeks ago before we brought the VBO homes in. So just keep in mind that 0.7 today is worth what a 1 rating was 3 weeks ago prior to broadband only coming in. So if you push your eyes over to the right side, and let's talk about Tulsa for a minute. So the value of the 1 rating in Tulsa among adults 25-54 increases 44%. So without VBO, you had 3,523 adults per point. So with VBO, it goes up to 5,086. So to do that same math, again, it's a 0.7. So with the 0.7 today, you're delivering 3,560 adults 25-54, which again is basically the same amount. It's actually a little bit higher than what that 1 rating was 3 weeks ago. So just do that adjustment. I have this saying just to kind of get my brain to keep in the new world thinking of a 0.7 is the new 1, just to kind of go with that mindset that I know if I see that 0.7 until I get rolling in this new BBO world, that I'm still delivering the same amount of adult 2554 impressions as I was with that 1 rating 3 weeks ago. So I'll turn it back over to you, Claudine.
Thanks so much. Okay, so the other thing that we announced at Nielsen, because we love to change it up, right, is that we announced in September that we were behind the Impressions First initiative. So this is part of, it's not part of BBO because we were going to install BBO a while ago, but the move to impressions has been happening in national as already in impressions, but in the local sphere for the past 5 to 6 years. So many of the group holding companies, the larger advertising agencies, have slowly been doing this, and they're probably at 85 to 90% of all of their clients. So what is the move to impressions? What's it all about? Well, the reality is that there's so much fragmentation out there, but move to impressions not to hide loss of audience, rather it's to be able to really get the value of the audience that's currently available. So what is this move to impressions? Well, first of all, right now, television, local TV, national TV, and local radio is all about ratings, right? We always talk about ratings and such. And the fact of the matter is, if you think about cross-platform, right? So there's digital, there's outdoor, there's print, etc. Everybody has their own metrics. But by moving to impressions, by moving to eyeballs, if you will, the viewer, that's an equalizer, right? Because now you're just talking about how many people did I reach? Because if you're talking to your clients or your in-house constituents, right? It's about how many people did I reach? What was the cost and the most effective way of reaching them? And we still know television is your best ROI, most effective reach vehicle. And now with broadband only homes, it's even expanding further. But the reason we wanted to go to impressions is because with impressions, we can equalize, remove the silos separating these metrics, right? So if I talk about an impression for television, an impression for digital, an impression for eyeball or persons for outdoor, etc., we want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. Now, understanding, right, that not all impressions are equal. Let's be very clear. So in local television, local radio, we still work on the quarter hour. And so for like local TV, you need a 5-minute qualifier. A individual has to be watching, excuse me, registered for 5 minutes to be counted as an impression in that quarter hour. Excuse me. So that's about 301 seconds, let's say, right? So that's 5 minutes. Versus digital. Well, digital doesn't have a standard. This is the IAB has been under attack for this because it's a 2-second, a 10-second completion of the video. So, let's just assume that we look at it and say you negotiated 10 seconds to be an impression for digital. So for us to be able to compare the two, we would need, excuse me, 30 10-second digital impressions to equal 1 TV impression. Okay, so that's the first thing, right? How do we get to that to make sure? So, again, depending on how you buy digital, the first way of doing it is duration. That doesn't really talk about engagement, right? Is 10 minutes of watching on a YouTube channel, pet tricks or cats playing with yarn as engaging as 10 minutes of an NBA game or an NFL game or of a news program or a drama, right? Not always. So that's the next thing. And so we have to talk about our first line to kind of equalizing that is duration. The second one is the qualitative aspect of it. But again, moving to impressions is the only way we can really create an environment for you all to have true cross-platform, to be able to tell your clients how many people were reached. When the phone rings or the cars go off the lot, we would know how many people were reached with your media. The other thing that we know by moving to impressions is that we're gaining audience that previously was being rounded out by ratings, right? So how many times have you looked at a buy and saw a 0? Well, the 0 wasn't because nobody was watching necessarily. It's that it didn't make the threshold for the rating, but we know audience was there because guess what? The phones rang, people came in. We know that people saw the spot. I used to always get those phone calls. Nobody saw my program, but we know they did. It's just because of the ratings threshold. But when we work at impressions, we can see and add up together and see the true reach of an audience and the true reach of persons that were seeing, that saw your spots on your different platforms. Okay, so by going away from ratings for posting purposes, what you're able to do is you're able to actually get credit for those eyeballs and be able to give true credit back to, you know, the local cable and local broadcaster. The other thing is that when we round, we lose a lot of that audience and we don't really understand the true value or where we're missing. But when we go to impressions, we get a real understanding. So one, there might be programs out there that because they didn't reach a certain threshold, you were like, I'm not going to put spots in those programs. But guess what? They have an audience. They might have a niche audience that is what your potential advertiser is looking for. So now you can discover those audiences, right? And the other thing is that now, you know, because we're including these types of households, you're going to have an easier time of understanding and your buys of how to look across the universe at how does television fit in? Where does TV fit in? Do I still need to supplement the same way because I'm getting it? So what it really does, as this quote says, is that impressions are a great equalizer across the board. It's ensuring all screens. So where your spot's being aired, you're getting credit. So if it's on the traditional, you know, television, the smart TV, the mobile device, the iPad, whatever it is, you're going to get the credit. And that means that all the programs and all of it is being counted. And I think that by looking and moving to impressions as an industry, we make a very good argument that that is the best metric for us to really understand the audience we're reaching. The other thing is that if this is kind of scary because you've always been doing this with ratings, remember, with broadband only, we have to reset all of our benchmark, what a rating, as Kim explained to you, what a rating is worth, what a impression is worth, how many impressions are in those numbers. If in planning, you're still comfortable with ratings because maybe you're looking at multiple markets, you know, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and multiple other markets, you can still plan on ratings, but execute and post on impressions, right? Because every single buying system, every planning system can toggle between the two. And to help our clients is we have on the Nielsen portal, our client portal, we have a broadband only calculator. So if you previously want to see, okay, how many impressions did I deliver with my previous buys based on ratings, you can go in there, input that information and get the numbers. And then you can see as you go forward what the delivery should be, okay? Because as Kimberly explained, ratings are going to go down because it's a larger universe, right? We've increased the universe in Oklahoma City by 150,000, in Tulsa by 100,000. So we have to be mindful of that it's a different universe. So ratings aren't necessarily going down. What is happening is the value of that rating is now exponentially larger because we have more households. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And let's take away talk about some key takeaways. Okay, first of all, as I mentioned, broadband only homes, which have already been in the Tulsa and Oklahoma City markets, they just weren't being counted in the measurement for local television, right? Because we've had broadband only in for the national since 2013. So now these homes are part of our sample, and that these homes, again, only get content through a Wi-Fi or internet connection. And we have, as I mentioned, those virtual MVPDs like DirecTV streaming, like Fubo, YouTube TV, and Hulu Live. Those same programming and commercial content. Adding broadband only to these local markets is a true methodological change and will affect numbers going forward, starting with the January survey. Okay, the inclusion of broadband only has definitely expanded our universe, right, which is going to affect rankings and ratings calculations. And remember, I mentioned that these are different types of households. They're younger, they're got kids, they're larger households, and they're higher income households. Expanding the universe doesn't mean because ratings look like they're going down because of same value. It means that we are providing a more opportunity to focus on these other homes and will contribute to higher impression delivery. And as our friends and partners here Cox Media, TV Everywhere, they're able to actually provide you that local viewing and impression across this expanded universe because they have such an incredible coverage of the market and in the state. And with that, I want to open it up and send it back to Mickey, I guess, for Q&A.
Thank you, Claudine. That was a lot of information to unpack. So thank you so much. As a reminder to those of you on our webinar this morning, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the question box. A couple of you have. So the first question I have for you is, I have always based my schedules on ratings, not impressions, and my client isn't big on changing things up. Is impression-based buying really the way to go?
Yeah, and believe me, I think I've had more conversations about this in the last 18 months than anything else, actually with major advertisers as well. I do believe that impressions are the way to go. I think that when we lived in a world of, 30 cable networks and, 7 or 8 networks, broadcast networks, then ratings made sense. You had 45 shares and different things. In today's environment, because we're talking about so many more households, and also because there's so many different things and different platforms and feeds, you really need to look at it on an impressions level, because as I mentioned, it's also the only way to gauge if you're doing multimedia, right? So if you're doing digital, which, if you come from a digital shop, this makes a slam dunk. If you come from a traditional media, the move to ratings is like a sacred cow, but the reality is you will be better off for it. And then, like I said, you can still plan on ratings, right? You're just going to have to adjust that, and then you can just execute on impressions, because that's going to really give you that bang for your buck. And your client might be surprised to find this whole undiscovered audience that they previously didn't know because it didn't show up on a ratings because it was too small to round up to 1.
That makes perfect sense and very important caveat there. We have another question. If I have DirecTV and also subscribe to Netflix and Hulu, am I considered a broadband only home?
No, actually, because you have, well, let me caveat. If you're a DirecTV traditional set-top box subscriber, then no, you are considered a traditional cable satellite home, or what we call pay TV home. If you subscribe to DirecTV streaming, their app, that's no equipment, then that would be a broadband only home.
Excellent. We have another question that's just popped in here. Just to confirm, there's nothing new in terms of how Nielsen is publishing numbers. It's just that BBO homes are being included in the new numbers, correct?
Correct. So that's right. So we're still providing ratings and impressions in your buying systems and your planning systems. You will notice though that in some of if you have any Nielsen programs, or if you get those, the default now is to impressions. But in your buying systems and in your planning systems, we have both being provided. And as we mentioned, the biggest change is the fact that we're including these homes that previously were not included.
All right. Do we have any other questions for Claudine? Yes, we do. What are the current thresholds of viewing per broadcast, cable, and BBO world to credit the viewing? Let me reread that. What are the current thresholds of viewing per broadcast, cable, and the BBO world to credit the viewing?
So I think now, and I apologize if I misunderstand this, if we're talking about what is the minimum reporting standard, right? So it's still 2.5 to be credited. On the overnights, which are available here in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, it's 0.5, but in the EVIP, or in the survey books, the measurements, it is a 2.5 and a 9.5 to be fully reportable. But I think pretty much it's a 2.5 cum, and we can definitely follow up with anyone regarding that, or it can be found in our reference supplement, which if you ever have problems sleeping, read that, you'll be out like a light.
Are there any of those expected to change with these changes of audience inclusion?
Great question. There's an ongoing discussion all the time regarding thresholds or cum minimum requirements and such. In fact, years ago, it was a 9.5 to be published in the book at all. That was lowered to 2.5 when we went to like more electronic instead of the heavy books, because the books would be much larger, if you remember those. But it's an ongoing discussion. To my knowledge, it still remains at 2.5. So that's that means they reach 2.5 on an average cum over a week of the marketplace.
Okay, can you clarify which BBO impressions are included in the new rating? For example, if watching live on Hulu Plus for TV, then that impression is counted, but if watching the same program on Hulu at a later time, then it is not included.
Great question. So yes, if they are, so for broadband only, if you have to be watching Hulu Live with the same programming and commercial load, right? You could even DVR it and watch it within 7 days to be credited. That is different from like a Hulu with a reduced commercial subscription or a dynamic insertion of ads. Again, that's our key indicator, and where you'll see the difference. It has to be the same ads and same commercial content. It can be time delayed, right? Because depending on the device you're using, there might be a buffering or slight delay. I used to drive everyone in my family crazy because I would set up different things to see how the feed would go. But by and large, it has to be the same commercial content and same programming content. Great question.
Is this something unique to Nielsen, or is ComScore and others expected to be including BBO in their home as well?
You know what? I can't speak to others. I do believe Nielsen is the only company that has with our partnerships with this virtual MVPDs and the inclusion of broadband only home across the country. Yeah, that is my belief, but I can't speak to whether ComScore or other measurement companies are doing. I think those are primarily like either set-top box data homes only or smart TVs. Nielsen has all of those, plus over the air and broadband only. And as we mentioned in the beginning, nationally, like very similar to what is Oklahoma City, 28% of American households are broadband only. And then we still are running, I think over 15% over the air. So we know for a fact that Nielsen is the only company that includes all those types of households.
We have a request. If you can receive the deck today, you will actually receive, just by signing up, GoToWebinar, you will receive a link of a recording from today. So you will have both the video and the deck for those of you who were wondering. We have one more question. If you all have any further, please dump them in the question box now, but we've got this last one here. Can you go over the value of ratings again, please? So how the value of
Okay, Rob, do you want to talk about the value of the rating point?
Sure. Do we want to go back to the slide to reference it and kind of go through it again?
3 slides back.
We are,
I can just speak to it too if I need to.
if you will go on and start speaking to it, they will get it called up for you.
Okay. So the way it works is we do reference like the full universe estimate. So it all bears back to what Claudine said and how the universes do grow when we bring in the broadband only. So in Oklahoma City in particular, I don't have the full expanded universe here, but that is something that we can follow up and send to you. Excuse me. But in Oklahoma City, for example, so prior to January 6th, basically, for every person's 2554 rating point, you got 4,863 impressions. That was the value of it. So with this grown universe, if you actually kind of go straight over to the right, you'll see with BBO, you're going to get 7,182. So that value increased 48%. But what I wanted to make sure everyone understands, because some people are still going to be living in this ratings universe for a little bit as we go through this transition to impressions. If you see a 0.68, 0.69, a 0.7 in Oklahoma City, I want to make sure you understand that that value is the same as what a 1 rating was prior to the broadband only homes coming in. So the value of that 0.68 in Oklahoma City is 4,884. So the reason for the arrow is me just indicating you are getting the same value for that 0.68 today as you were with that 1 rating prior to January 6th. So whether you like the slogan or not, I'm doing it in all my markets that I work with. I do say that 0.7 that you're seeing now is your new 1, just so you can remember that 0.7 is delivering the same amount of adult 25-54 impressions as that 1 rating was before broadband only came in. So
Thank you,
that
Kimberly.
helped.
Super helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's good just to reiterate to people as this is a substantial change, right? We're adding in more people. And so while it looks like a rating is going down, really what you're finding is you actually just have a larger audience because your universe has expanded. So it's actually, as I believe Claudine said earlier, much more valuable. We do have another question here. How do we know which Hulu is being reported? How do we know if Hulu has a full commercial load?
Right. So it depends. If the only ones that are being included in the local currency, as you know it, in your buying systems, is the Hulu Live, right? And so it is encoded a certain way, watermarked, if you will, similar to an ISKI code if you've done on your commercials. And so we know what aired where, and we cross-check it against the local market as well, right? So on a daily basis in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa, we get a download from these virtual MVPDs like Hulu Live, and then we're able to see it. We are very much aware when if it's a ad that's on Hulu, again with reduced commercials or a different type or no commercials, that we know what can be credited or not. So we've been doing this on a national basis, like I said, for quite a while. And we're actually, if you have Hulu or Hulu Live, you can actually go into the permissible uses of the app, and you'll see that Nielsen is part of that. Same thing with YouTube TV, DirecTV streaming, and I believe also Cox. You can see that we are in the permissible uses.
Excellent. All right. I believe that answers all of our questions that we have now. Thank you both so much for your help today. This was very educational. And as we promised, we have a couple of door prizes. So let's see. The team has just spun our little wheel, and it looks like the TV, Elisa Holder. You are our winner. Congratulations, Elisa. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Your Cox Media rep will be in contact with you, and we will figure out how to get that delivered for you. And then for the AirPod Pros, it looks like Tisha Richardson is our second winner. So congratulations. Thank you all so much for attending today. We appreciate that you took the time out of your schedule to be with us. Your Cox Media consultant will reach out to you to get more information soon. Thank you for your time and engagement. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you all.